Houston Texans, Houston Rockets, Houston Dynamo, Houston everything, Houston born and raised, H-Town rebel, Space Cadet Sports.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, folks of all stripes, and distinguished guests, put your hands together for the Space Cadet Sports Podcast. Houston, we have Paul Salazar Jr.
Hey y'all, welcome back to the Space Cadet Sports Podcast, your Houston sports podcast for diehard Houston sports fans from a diehard Houston sports fan. I'm Paul Salazar Jr., your favorite diehard Astros fan podcaster, and even if I'm not, I'm claiming it now. I'm an actor, improviser, writer, creative multi-hyphenate, a person who doesn't turn off their cell phone during their podcast. It's trade deadline, folks. But most importantly, I'm a proud Houston native, and I have the receipts to prove it. That's right, I once stood behind Paul Wall in the Heights Kroger. I've spent the last decade or so as a comedy writer here in Los Angeles, and now, well, I'm podcasting. That's what happens when you hit 10 years out here. You start absent-mindedly calling it the 10 instead of I-10. And they give you a podcast. Welcome to said podcast. Space Cadet Sports started as a passion project because most media is infuriating as a diehard long-term fan of the Houston Astros and your other Houston sports teams. Here we aren't doom and gloom casual fans, or worse, the national media haters. We love our teams and root them on, but we also try to discuss the ins and outs of them without too much homerism. The key word here, of course, is try. I'd like to welcome returning listeners and welcome new listeners to what my brother calls a Paul Broad Pod Ball blog. Hey, brother. Shout out to my brothers. Shout out to Arrested Development fans. Please go check out spacecadetsports.substack.com for the full blog experience, or the full blog experience, depending on your interpretation of my pronunciation there. We are recording this transmission live. Well, I'm live. You're listening to it on a recording, let's be clear, here in sunny Los Angeles, where I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and co-producer, the Roz to my Frasier. Carla, the dog, is here with me, and folks, it's a good day. She just sat down right next to me on the recording chaise lounge that I'm currently sitting on. I don't know why I went fancy with the chaise lounge. I don't know. I like to lounge, folks. Well, we all know that she's got the hot takes on this pod. She may get on mic from time to time. I don't silence her. I just hit stop recording and then do it off mic. On this episode, it's the trade deadline special. We are excited to get to the news, to the Carlos Correa news. I can't believe it, folks. But before we completely get to it, of course, I want to wish a good day, mates, to my Australian listeners out there, all my H-Town hustlers, all my Houston fans, all the Australians out there. Good day. Thanks for listening, but let's get to it. Folks, there is no other way around it. This is one of the biggest trade deadlines the Astros have had. I was not anticipating this. Those of you know, those of you who listen to the podcast, those of you who read the blog, you know that I said, I called it dumb trade predictions. I said, we're going to have some trade predictions, and who am I to predict? Who is really anybody to predict, unless you, really have sources with some Major League Baseball front offices. There's only a small handful of people that really know what they're talking about when they're predicting trades. But everybody does. So of course I went along and did my silly predictions as well. And of course I was crazy off. And I admitted this in the article. You can go back and read it. It's fun. For those of you who are new to this, I'm a comedian. I'm a super fan. I don't pretend to be a journalist. I don't pretend to be something I'm not. I'm not. This podcast isn't about pretending to be something you're not. This podcast isn't about hate. This podcast is about love. This podcast is supposed to be good for your fandom and good for your heart. There's too many crazy things in this world right now to just be angry all the time. We're not John Boy. We're not gonna tell players to kill themselves and crazy stuff like that. Here we love players. I don't understand why baseball has to be this hateful. We're trying to show the love here. So of course, we're going to talk about our love for the Houston Astros and Carlos Correa today. So let's get to it. Officially, from about 20 minutes ago, the Astros have a press release. It says that we have acquired, or I should say, quote, that's how you know I'm not a journalist, quote, we have acquired infielder Carlos Correa and outfielder Jesús Sánchez. And folks, yesterday, I believe it was yesterday. Look, it's been a long afternoon for your boy. We also got Ramon Urías added to the team, another infielder. We'll get to that as well. Correa, first and foremost, we were looking for. I really didn't want to start the podcast until I had some kind of trade information about the Correa trade. We're still looking for financials, but right now I do have the official release from the Astros that they acquired Correa for cash considerations. Correa and cash considerations from the Minnesota Twins in exchange for minor league left-handed pitcher Matt Mikulski. What? This whole trade is crazy. This whole thing has been crazy for me. Of course, I was not expecting the Astros to trade for Carlos Correa. In fact, when the tweets came out, when the rumors started to circulate, those of you who know, I'm not on Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky. I just can't be on Twitter. I'm sorry. It's a ridiculous place full of angry, hateful people. I just can't do it. Not even for sports news. But it is nice that I have a Yankees fan friend who is more than willing to be in that world of hate, and he sends me all the all the tweets, all the X's from the X-boys out there. And when he sent me that tweet that the Astros were considering a trade for Carlos Correa, I was like, of course they are. Of course they're. Look, you got to shoot your shot during the trade deadline. You have to talk to people about everybody. Who knows who is available? Who knows what you can afford? Who knows what the prices are? So for me. To me, when I see a story out there, even if it's from an official person, Brian McTaggart, Chandler Rome, Ari Alexander, even if it's from these guys, I still take it with a grain of salt. Because, of course, any general manager worth their salt would be trying to be in talks with any player at the trade deadline that they can possibly be in talks about, because you're trying to improve your team. You're trying to see who's available. You're trying to see what the prices for things are in the market. So it's just worth it to do your due diligence as a general manager. Just because you're inquiring about a player or because a team is inquiring about a player doesn't mean a trade is completely going to happen or it's that serious. So when I heard initially the Carlos Correa news, honestly, I did not take it that seriously. Shame on me. Shame. Truthfully, I just didn't know if the Astros would have what it takes to trade for a player the caliber of Carlos Correa. But what I completely didn't anticipate, is that the Twins would go on a fire sale. The Twins traded everybody except for Brian Buxton, Joe Kelly as well, I was not anticipating the Twins to go on this much of a fire sale. So the story is, watching the MLB Network trying to get the down low, trying to get the information for y'all today. Not only do I watch every single Astros baseball game, I try my hardest to keep up myself abreast in the news about the Astros and in baseball here. So I was watching the Major League Network all morning, and one thing they were saying, one of the things that they were reporting is that basically Carlos Correa and the Twins had a conversation, and the conversation wasn't that long. It was, y'all aren't very good, and I was supposed to be here to be on a playoff contender. And the Twins were like, yep, brother, you're right. We're not very good, and I don't think we're going to be in contention. you want to get traded? And, pretty much the only answer Correa had was yes, but only to one team. The only team, and I believe I heard an audio clip of Carlos Correa, basically saying the only team that he wanted to go to or be considered was Houston Astros. That's something I heard from his words. Maybe I think that's probably pretty accurate. I don't think Carlos Correa, after his free agency, I think he has a very limited list of teams that he considers to be playoff contenders and teams that he would want to play for. And I think he was just trying to push them towards the Astros. Now, I think because of this, because the Twins wanting to go on a fire sale, because the Twins needed to move Carlos Correa, I think they don't, they just don't see this team, the Twins roster as of yesterday, at least. Now it's a completely different roster, but they just didn't have any faith in that roster, and it was just time to blow it up. And, so the Astros truly, Astros organization and fans get lucky that this was a trade that was very much in favor of the Astros. Truthfully, you gotta be happy for Jim Crane and Dana Brown getting it done. I think there is definitely something to, like my Yankees fans friends, of course, they're texting me, making jokes about you let Correa walk only to trade for him. So I think in some degree there could be some owners that are like, no, we had a negotiations. I'm not going to go back there. I'm going to look like a fool. But Jim Crane wants this team to compete. Dana Brown wants this team to compete. So they're willing to make this trade happen. And I am so excited about this. We'll definitely get into it more. I think what I'm going to do right now, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue to talk about the Correa trade. We're going to talk about the other Astros trade on the other side of this break. We'll be right back.
Houston Astros, Houston Texans, Houston Rockets, Houston Dynamo, Houston everything, Houston born and raised, H-Town Rebel Space Cadet Sports.
And we're back. Welcome back, folks, to the Space Cadet Sports Podcast. I'm your host, as always. It hasn't changed yet. Carla didn't fire me yet, although she is heavily sighing. I think she's a little bored here. But it's been a lot of baseball news for her today. She's a trooper. She was excited. But we are back to talk about the Carlos Correa trade, folks. We're talking on the other side of the break about how, in a way, you almost have to eat a little humble pie as Jim Crane, trading back for Carlos Correa. There's going to be some detractors. You also know that as GM Dana Brown, if this really doesn't go well, you could look really foolish as a GM and as an organization. However, I'm fairly confident that this will be a great move for Carlos Correa and for the Astros. But let's talk a little bit about how this trade happened. And I really think the besides Correa wanting to move from the Twins and the Twins being more than willing to completely blow up their entire roster, the biggest impetus for this, I believe, is Isaac Paredes. Isaac Paredes has truthfully, felt like the MVP for a good stretch there. He and Cam Smith and Hayden Wesneski really had not just Astros fans, but pretty much baseball pundits everywhere saying that the Astros won the Kyle Tucker trade, which is something that I don't think anybody would have guessed, anyone would have said this season. But it already felt like the Astros might have won that trade. And then Isaac Paredes went down with a terrible injury, a hamstring injury that just, he was just running the first. It looked really bad. We hadn't gotten any information about it. And then the next thing we know, Isaac Paredes is seeking a second opinion, which is never a great sign. So it does look like Isaac Paredes is going to be shut down for multiple months here. But I believe what I read earlier was 2 to 3 months. It looks essentially as if Isaac Paredes is done for the year. The Astros will be happy to have him back next season. And with that happening, it really changed the Astros their priorities of making sure they shore up that infield a little bit. With Jeremy Pena coming back, with Mauricio Dubon there, I wasn't sure what type of position player they were going to be able to get. Not just because we had those players there, but just because of the market, because they couldn't afford to move too many players. It seemed like the price would be high for a player like Carlos Correa. Not that I was even anticipating to get him. It wasn't even on my radar that Carlos Correa would be an Astro, just to be completely honest here, And I think that kind of changed things. I also think that the Astros really struggled to find a pitcher this deadline. If you read my dumb trade predictions article, you do know that I was saying that I thought they were going to heavily go after a pitcher, and that might have still been the case. They probably really wanted a pitcher. They were trying to go after Dylan Cease from the San Diego Padres, and that just didn't fall through. They just didn't have enough hours to negotiate for Dylan Cease. I read somewhere that one of the trades proposals would be centered around outfielder Jacob Melton for Cease, which I could kind of see, a package deal with him in the center, maybe moving the needle a little bit, but I don't think the Padres and the Astros just were able to get it done. The Padres GM and Dana Brown, I'm sure they're great negotiators. They're definitely both well regarded in the league. I think they just couldn't figure out a way that both GMs and both organizations felt good about, so it just never came into fruition. I think the Astros just could not find a starting pitcher for a price that they felt good about. I think they were, the word was they were also trying to get a relief pitcher from San Diego. They could not find a way to get that pitching trade done. I think the Astros did not want to walk away from the trade deadline with not too much. They needed to move the needle. They want to win. They want not only to win the West, but they want to get back to the ALCS. They want to get back to the World Series. And these moves proved that. So, Isaac Paredes going down. Carlos Correa and the Twins having a falling out. The Twins completely willing to blow their entire roster up and just start fresh. All were the key factors in getting Carlos Correa back to the Astros. But one of the biggest ones, and what I want to focus on a little bit here before I move on, is Carlos Correa's humility. And I know a lot of players, a lot of fans, you've seen Carlos Correa, really pop off, whether it's bat flips, whether it's in the media, being honest, being a little feisty. He might not be a guy that you completely equate with humility. I think a lot of us don't, we don't consider athletes to be humble sometimes, but the fact of the matter is, the elephant in the room is, don't we already have a shortstop? Yeah, we have Jeremy Pena. He is coming back from injury very soon. He's been just absolutely destroying balls in his minor league rehabs right now, and he's hopefully going to be returning to this team very soon. So, if we already have a shortstop, why are we trading for a future Hall of Fame shortstop like Carlos Correa? Well, because Carlos Correa is humble enough to say, hey, buddy, I'll play third base for the Astros. And, I mean, this organization, you got to be very happy with this, because not only is Jose Altuve willing to play left field, willing to split time between left field and second base. This has been a thing that the Astros have been talking to him about since the off season. But the fact of the matter is, that baseball fans, baseball Twitter, baseball pundits are very reactionary. So as soon as Altuve played his first game at second, everybody was saying, well, the experiment is over. Jose Altuve is not good enough to play left field. I love the fact that Altuve just frankly doesn't care about all that noise. He's willing to do it if it's good for the team. And, that's not always the case, Look at Rafael Devers. Look at that kind of whole drama. It's so nice to have your franchise player say, you know what? If this helps the team, I'll do it. And when that starts from Jose Altuve, that makes it really easy for Jose Altuve to call Carlos Correa and be like, hey, buddy, you going to play third for us? And Carlos Correa agreeing to play third base for the Houston Astros. You love to see it. Not only is this going to make the Astros that much better, but just that another amazing player with this franchise just saying, I'll move positions. I don't mind. If this what makes the team if this what makes us more competitive, then we need to do it to remain competitive. So that you just love to see that it really does go a long way. Now, a lot of friends, a lot of people, they've reached out to me and it's like, how's this going to work? Shouldn't we be worried? And I'm like, look, I don't think we need to worry too much about next season right now. This is a move to help us finish this season strong and hopefully have a great playoff run. Now, obviously, they still have to win games. They have to figure it out. There's plenty of season left. I'm not calling it. I'm not saying the season's over. Now there are some pundits that are already saying that. They're like, well, the Astros won the West. Look, there's still some games to play, folks. We still got to watch this team pull it together and get healthy, especially their starting pitchers now. I could say that for every single starting pitcher that's injured, and this podcast would be 30 minutes long. But we still need to get healthy. Is my point. I'm just saying. This is definitely a great move in that direction of keeping them competitive and getting them to the playoffs. However, next season, some people are already getting, wringing their hands about that. You're panicking just because y'all love panicking. I think some people just like getting emotional and angry and upset over baseball. It's just, I think truthfully what it is, I've talked about this before, men, we got to be better. Anybody, not just men, there's plenty of sports fans that listen to this podcast that aren't men. I know that. I've checked the numbers, but it's just mainly a male problem. But folks, if you're getting super emotional about baseball, just remember, it's probably displaced anger, emotion, displaced fear. There's so many things happening in the world right now. Let's focus on those bigger battles than getting completely upset and distraught over baseball all the time. I mean, vent, get your emotions out. Sometimes it's healthy to displace those emotions, but don't go too crazy with it. I think when we're looking at next season, we can look at that in a couple months for sure. We'll definitely get into it. But right now, I'm not too worried. We have at first base, Christian Walker. Second base, Isaac Paredes. Shortstop, Jeremy Pena. And third base, Carlos Correa. I mean, that seems pretty great. And yeah, that means Altuve will most likely have to play a lot of left field. Have to figure out some time to play left, some time to play DH. It definitely... It can get a little tight there. That might be a little logjam, but that's a problem for later, okay? I'm not too stressed on it. And, truthfully, I think having a wealth of good players is not a problem. So we'll deal with that problem later. But overall, how I feel about this trade is I am very excited. Not just because I love Carlos Correa as a person and his history with the Houston Astros, but because I love the leadership he brings. One of the things that we talked about ever since Correa left is, who's going to be that swag leader in the clubhouse? Who's going to be the guy that gets in Fromber's chest? Who is that vocal leader? Well, we have him now. We definitely have a guy that knows how to do that and is not going to be shy to step up, even though he hasn't been with the team for a couple seasons, and play that leadership role. You love to see it. And also we have cash considerations for just we need to see the financials to really figure out, how this trade works out. But the fact that they're giving cash considerations for Carlos Correa, the fact that the Astros only had to give up one minor league pitcher, I mean, they won this trade. All that needs to happen is Carlos Correa, play like Carlos Correa plays. Hopefully stay healthy. We shall see. Moving on, let's talk about Jesús Hernandez. Jesús Hernandez is a left-handed outfield bat is what I'm trying to say. He was acquired from the Miami Marlins in exchange for Ryan Gusto, minor leaguer Chase Jaworski, who plays infield, and minor league outfielder Esmil Valencia. Ryan Gusto has definitely had some struggles. It's hard to see a starting pitcher go when we didn't trade for a starting pitcher and we need healthy starting pitching. But I'm just being optimistic, maybe. Maybe this is some optimistic delusion. Let me know what you think, folks. But I think if they're trading away Ryan Gusto, that means they feel pretty good about these starting pitchers coming back from their rehab stints, ready to pitch. Maybe they feel good about Lance McCullers coming back. I mean, I'm still hesitant to see what he's capable of doing. We love Lance on the podcast, but we are a little hesitant to see what his form and fit might be for the rest of the season. But you love to see that the Astros kind of get another left-handed bat there. I think in the projected lineups on the Major League Trade Deadline show, they even had him starting at DH, Sánchez, which I was like, that's kind of hilarious. I think, if anything, Jose Altuve would DH in that lineup. But we'll get to my projected lineups later. That's not what this podcast is. We're the Trade Deadline special right now. But that was a press release for that. Let's see here. From Buster Olney, I'm seeing here that the Minnesota Twins included $33 million in cash to help cover the remaining $104 million that Carlos Correa is owed through the remainder of his contract that runs through 2028. Okay, so the Astros were pushing for $50 million. It looks like they got 33. We'll run those numbers. This looks like a screenshot. Okay, no, this is from Jeff Passan. Okay, so that should be accurate. Sorry, folks, I'm reading stuff live as I as I'm trying to give that information out to you folks. But that it is nice to see that they got some money back. Obviously, you would hope that they would pay the majority of it, but I mean, $33 million, you're getting them to pay part of it. So we'll have to look at that as more information comes in. But the other person that we traded for was Ramon Urías, who is an infielder. Kind of, to me, when he was the first player that we traded for from the Baltimore Orioles, and when we got Urías, who is another Mexicano, shout out Mexico. Isaac Paredes went down with an injury, but now we have another Mexican player on the roster. You love to see it. But when we first got him, I was like, okay, this is like kind of like some Mauricio Dubon insurance. This is like another infield utility guy, and it's good to have because we've been having some health troubles, and honestly, we could use some flexibility in this roster still. So for me, Ramon Urías wasn't, and I believe he only has 1 year left on the contract there, so he's kind of a rental. For me, it was just like, we don't want to play Zach Short anymore, so we're getting somebody to help shore up that roster there. And for the Ramon Urías trade, let's take a quick look at it here. He was sorry, I'm struggling to get this to pull up. He's coming from ESPN now. It'll get there eventually. That's right. They received a minor league AA player, Twine Palmer, in return. So he's also a Golden Glove third baseman that he won in 2022, where he has most of his experience, but also he can play second base and shortstop, and he's played a couple games this season at first base. So that's kind of why I feel like he's kind of like Dubon insurance, because that's essentially what Dubon does. Is Doobie can play third. He also fills in a lot of times at shortstop and second, and occasionally will take reps at first when we absolutely need that. But I really feel like this is just keeping, we've been having so many injuries and having a lot of kind of quadruple A players here. This is just trying to get some professional backup here for the Houston Astros going forward. So folks, we're very, very excited about that. I think he might not, be the biggest name or somebody that we're going to see a lot of playing time out of, but it didn't cost very much. We can send some of those players that have been struggling lately back down to the minors and have a more competitive squad. I think mostly at the end of the trade deadline, right now, I think the Astros kind of won the trade deadline. When you look at what they gave up and what they got, it's truthfully amazing. Dana Brown, shout out to Dana Brown. I think he truthfully won the trade deadline. I don't know. Right now, if I had to give it a grade, I would give it an A. I think there's going to be some time to tell, but this is a great trade deadline for the Houston Astros fans, not just rationally when we're looking at the roster, but emotionally, because the prodigal son, Carlos Correa, is returning home. Now, there's one more thing before we sign off today, and that's what my Yankees fans' friends have been teasing me about, is that the Astros and Jim Crane let Carlos Correa walk, only to have him return a couple seasons later and paying a good majority, a good part of that contract. Well, folks, what I'll say is that I get it. And yeah, I do think it's no secret to all of us Astros fans that Jim Crane has let a lot of players walk. I think the Carlos Correa contract plus his health was a tough pill to swallow. I still maintain that it was probably best for Carlos Correa to move on. And at that time in free agency, for what he was asking for, he had an amazing walk here. It was a lot of money, and there was a little bit of a bidding war, and he has had some health problems. So, and the biggest thing is, we had Jeremy Pena. We didn't know at the time Jeremy Pena was Jeremy Pena, but we were able, obviously, to replace him and still do well and go to the World Series. So, I get it. It does seem a little silly. And I understand, like a lot of Yankees fans, they basically, what they're saying is like, yes, we spend a lot of money, but we don't, the baseball teams don't release their financials. These people have a lot of money and they're crying poverty constantly. So, I do see both sides of this. I do think that you want your owners to be willing to spend money. You just don't want them to spend foolishly. And while Carlos Correa is a great player, they were trying to be prudent by going with Jeremy Pena. So I understand that. But I also understand getting him back here. We need a third baseman. We need some firepower. Frankly, this does make me worry that Yordan Alvarez might be a little slower to come back than we were even thinking that could be. So, but with Carlos Correa here, that could hopefully shore up this lineup and get us some slugging like I've been asking for. I've been asking for some extra base hits. I've been asking for some home runs. I've been asking for slugging from this lineup, and sadly, a lot of the players on the lineup, it's been a struggle lately. This offense should be a lot more fun to watch tomorrow. Oh my goodness. Tomorrow, the Astros are playing the Boston Red Sox. They're going to be reunited with Alex Bregman. And Breggy is going to be on the outside looking in. Hopefully the Astros can can win that series and really put the hurt on the Red Sox. I really haven't looked at that today just because I've been so busy with the trade deadline. But I truthfully, with all this momentum behind the Astros, I think that they're going to win this series just because they're feeling it right now. I feel like it's going to be like a reminder of what those Correa, Altuve years were like, and it's going to fire this team up. Right now, my biggest concern is pitching. We need those pitchers to come back healthy. But we'll save that for another day. And maybe I'll write up a little quick series preview for the Boston series. You can find that at the blog at Space Cadet Sports. And I truthfully, I feel like I can be talking about this all day. I am very excited for Carlos Correa to be returning to the Houston Astros. I am very hopeful that this will be seen as an amazing trade. There is a very small possibility that if there are some struggles, this could be seen as a little silly. But at the end of the day, I don't think the struggles are... I think it'll be a little streaky if he has some troubles. I hope and pray that his health maintains, and that'll be more than fine. I think our biggest problem is that health. We need Carlos Correa to be healthy, and this team struggles with injuries. So if Carlos Correa has injury problems, that is going to be the thing that does end this trade. So y'all, say your apologies, go to your enemies and make amends, because we need to have some good vibes around this Astros team. We do not need any more injuries, especially from Carlos Correa. But with that being said, folks, that's going to do it for this transmission, Space Cadets. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. The Paulcast, if you will. Please like, rate, review, subscribe, share, bop it, kick it, skip it, smash it. Hit all of those buttons for me. We are a small podcast and only go as far as our listenership takes us. We are supported by listeners like you. Boom, doom, doom, doom. So please share with an Astro fan or Australian in your life and give us a 5-star rating wherever you are listening to this podcast on. Check out the Substack at spacecadetsports.substack.com, where you'll get that series preview for the Boston series coming up later this evening, or maybe early tomorrow morning. And you can subscribe. So much content I just try to get out there for free because I want y'all to... I don't want to have stuff behind a paywall. I only do paywall stuff to say thank you to the people that do have sign up for those subscriptions there. So go check out the Substack, please. Reach out on social media. Let me know your takes. Let me know what you think about the Carlos Correa trade on social media at Space Cadet Sports, at spacecadetsports.bsky.social, or you can call in and let me know your take in a voicemail at speakpipe.com/Space Cadet Sports. Thank you so much for listening. If you've gotten this far and you're like, you know what? I love this Paul guy. Well, thank you so much. You can find me making jokes, memes, art, podcasts, and so much more on social media at Paul Salazar Jr., at paulsalazarjr.bsky.social, and www.paulsalazarjr.net, because I'm nothing but net, where you can find my other Substack where I write about movies, music, make poems, art, so much silly stuff. You can find that and so much other nonsense there. You can also check out my merch. You can get my aircraft carrier Cam Smith hat available there. If you don't want to subscribe to the Substack, but you still want to support your boy, help buy Carlo those treats. You can find that merch on the website, paulsalazarjr.net. We're going to have a Carlo the Dog hat dropping soon on the merch line, so check that out. Thanks so much for listening. Folks, remember to be the best that you can be. Keep your head up, kid. And as always, vamos Houston.
Houston Astros, Houston Texans, Houston Rockets, Houston Dynamo, Houston everything, Houston born and raised, H-Town Rebel Space